Today's guest is a man who has quietly shaped some of the most important legal outcomes in South Africa's competition law. But the chances are, if you're not in the legal profession, you may never have heard his name. Anton Roets is one of the co-founders of Norton's Inc. Attorneys at Law. Today on Mavericks, we go beyond the courtroom. We find out who the man is behind the legal mind and what does it really take to reshape law and also to start a business, start a practice, a law firm. So slightly different focus on Mavericks today. It's great to have you along. And remember that if you see anything here that you like and you hear anything that you like, subscribe. Help us grow this thing, share it, like it, and make it big. That's what it's all about. Anton, thank you so much for your time. I know that with lawyers, time is money. So I really do appreciate the fact that you have cleared your diary for this. It's great to have you on Mavericks. I've often wondered, is there a secret WhatsApp group where top competition lawyers share memes about mergers and abuse dominance?
No, we don't particularly.
I think we may have just stumbled onto a gold mine, a niche gold mine here.
I think the thing that you'll find about lawyers is lawyers are inherently competitive. So we don't tend to collaborate with each other. We tend to have fights with each other.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Before we get into the law stuff, one of the fascinating things I found out while I was just trying to find out a little bit about you, and let me just tell you, it's quite difficult. You're not an easy man to research, which is great, I guess, from your perspective. But by 2008, you'd completed 9 Comrades Marathon. Fast forward to 2025, have you added to that number?
James, yeah, I did 10. Then 2 non-finishes, then a 13-year gap, and then I've done another 4. Not particularly fast, I have to tell you, but anyway.
I have to say, anybody who does 1 Comrades, let alone as many as you've done, earns my respect flat out, because it's one of the, it's an ultra-marathon, it's a tough thing. To be able to convince other people to do that, people who are not necessarily runners, and you have a history of doing this with people who might not have wanted to do the Comrades, you managed to convince them. It speaks about 2 things. It speaks about the fact that you are incredibly convincing, and maybe speaks to the fact that you're a brilliant lawyer as well.
Well, I'll take the compliment, James. I might also talk to Chinese drip torture. I think someone once said my style of argument is endless repetition. So,
does that help at law, to have endless repetition, or
It seems to work for Comrades.
Let's get into your story, because you were doing fine at one of South Africa's top law firms, and I'm not going to mention their name. What made you say one day, which I was simplifying it, but what made you say, you know what, I'm going to build my own thing? Was it an epiphany, or was it a bit of a slow burn that you decided that, let's start our own law practice?
James, I think the critical thing here is it was a team thing in a sense. There were 4 of us who set up Norton's. All 4 of us were at Weber's at that particular point. I think we've got a very high regard for Weber's as a great firm. And I think it probably comes to the fact that we liked, any corporate has many benefits to it, but one of the downsides is sometimes they're a little bit less open to greater innovation. It's much easier to take a decision when there are 4 of you than when there are 80 of you, whatever. And also, you've also got, within big law firms, the benefit you get is you get wide experience, you get skills from various places, but you sometimes end up with a bit of siloing, where when you're in a smaller firm, you're able to cover much broader sweeps of the law. If that makes sense.
Well, yeah, when you started though, it's quite a competition law, and forgive me for not, it's not, and perhaps for our audience as well, competition law might not be the thing that people first think of when they think of legal practices. Why that niche that you decided to start in?
James, well, I can give you quite a nice answer. I can give you the truth. And the truth
is what we want.
The truth was that I joined Webber Wentzel in 2000. I was in the shipping law department, and it so happened that it was a slightly slow time after I joined. There was a thing that came out every month that indicated the hours that everyone works, and my hours weren't particularly impressive. And then what I saw was there was an advert in the De Rebus saying that the competition law department in Johannesburg needed some assistance. So I phoned Anthony Norton, who was the head of the department, and I said, do you need a hand for a month or 2? Anyway,
So,
That's 25 years ago.
The rest is history, as they say.
So I was fortunate, to take that, so I was very fortunate because the point at which I joined, 2000, was just a year, it was less than a year after the Competition Act came into force in South Africa.
Right.
So we'd had a totally different regime before a new act came into force, and what it meant is I hit it at a point where it was really at the early stages. So, the benefit one gets is one's there from the beginning. So you see the developments as they happen, which is very fortunate, I think.
For those who don't know too much about what the difference is between the different forms of law, what is competition law? What is its main focus?
So competition law competition law has an interesting field in the sense that it combines economics, law, and then also it's pretty practical about how businesses operate. That's the background, sort of the broad overarching concept. But it looks at three main areas. One is mergers. So if a firm buys another firm and it's over a specific size, then you have to notify that and you have to get approval from the competition authorities. So we will help firms in that, getting approval. Or if a firm has a difficulty with a potential merger, we'll assist that firm explaining to the commission and the tribunal why there's a problem with a merger. So that's the one area. The second area is there's certain, can I call them competition law offences? And those are price fixing, cartels, or abuses of dominance. Large firm which acts in a way which is seen to be abusing its dominant position as opposed to competing on the merits, as they put it. So those are the two main areas. And then there are other things like market inquiries and the like. Market inquiry is essentially when the Competition Commission does an inquiry to work out, is the market functioning in a competitive way? And then makes recommendations, or now can actually propose remedies to address.
So in some respects, it sounds, again, to a non-legal brain, that you're the champion of the people to a certain degree, because there are certain aspects of competition law where you are protecting the consumer whilst protecting companies at the same time. Would that be fair, or am I perhaps oversimplifying things there?
I like your
call us for your marketing needs.
But so competition law is all about protecting the process. Well, there are two aspects of it. In South Africa, there's a second aspect, which is public interest. But the main aspect is that you protect the competitive process, and the intuition is if you protect the competitive process, that creates greater efficiencies. That means that the market operates better. That means that consumers should be getting better prices and better choice, in a sense. As I said, there's a second aspect in South Africa which is public interest, where there's a particular focus on employees, historically disadvantaged people, small and medium-sized enterprises, and kind of inclusion, if I can call it that. So in that sense, where we do assist to get a competitive merger through, well, what you're then doing is you're creating greater efficiency, which should redound to the benefit of the economy. Where you block a anti-competitive merger, you should be benefiting consumers because you'll ensure that they have more choice, better prices, etc., through the competitive process.
Yeah, that's great. You were talking about how, for you personally, timing was great in 2000 when you at Webber Wentzel joined the competition law department. But when you started Norton's Inc., perhaps the timing wasn't as great. And in some respects, I'd like to think, this is a terrible comparison, but it's very similar to my own story with MILK+SUGAR, is that we both started our companies during the 2008-2009 recession, which, trust me, was rough on us. I'm sure rough on you. How did you ride out that storm, and what were some of the early challenges you faced in starting up a law practice?
I think, James, the one thing is that it wasn't as if we'd had a long plan. Yeah. So basically what happened is I think we had a pretty good exit from Webber's. Obviously, they weren't happy that we were leaving, but it happened it's basically 2 weeks. They said to us, okay, you want to go? Fine, you need to go. We said, well, we can't go because we've got cases that are running, they're your clients. And then they said, okay, you can have another week. So they gave us 1 week and then they extended it for 2 weeks. And we then basically, within that short period of time, had to buy a company, register with the Law Society, all kinds of admin stuff, bank accounts, find offices. We ended up in, I think it was Regent office up in Parktown. And the other thing that we didn't know, we had no idea whether any of our clients would follow us. So we had no guarantee of ongoing revenue. Because what happened is Webber's would then write a letter to the clients and say, do you want the file to stay with us? Do you want the file to go with them? And some of the clients said stay with Webber's. Some said go with them. And some said, we don't have any live matters, so we'll decide when a live matter comes whether we go or stay. So I think that the big challenge was you had no idea what was coming, and you're in a pretty basic place. I think we had a kind of fairly noisy neighbours in these, these shared offices. Doesn't necessarily give the best impression when you're trying to create the impression that you're you
serious legal
serious things. Yeah. So
how do you overcome? I mean, I think that there's commonality for any entrepreneur, anybody who's starting up a business. I mean, it's like that story sounds very familiar. It's like you have an idea that you want to start your own firm. But circumstances, unless you take that long burn approach where you're planning for a very long time, you find yourself in the situation that you're in. Then you've got these outside forces of a recession where companies don't necessarily have the money to spend on legal firms. What were some of the strategies that you employed to get the business off the ground that other legal startups might find helpful, or as entrepreneurs might be a good lesson for us?
I think, James, look, I have to say we were very fortunate. I think that's the first thing. What we tried to do is really just to do what lawyers generally try and do. You try and work harder, you try and work faster, you try and give innovative ideas, innovative solutions. I think we were pretty fortunate in that. I mean, as I said, this is very much a team effort. And I think my partners were incredibly hardworking and incredibly innovative. And I think that's been one of our kind of I think our success or seeds in our success was this ability to combine things and to look at things slightly differently, bring innovative solutions, propose innovative solutions, and sometimes also a little bit of, I hate to use the expression because it's a terrible cliche now, but out of the box type of thinking, where you look at it slightly differently. I mean, I'll say particularly for Anthony, he is a remarkable guy in being able to see things in quite a different way and a slightly unorthodox way. He'll sometimes look at something and other people say, but that can't be. And then he'll go, why can't it be? And then you go, actually, he's right.
Look, it is a hackneyed phrase, but I think it's one that speaks specifically to startups and to new businesses, is that you really do have to think differently.
Yeah.
You do have to think out of the box. You do, because otherwise all you become is what you left.
Yep.
But you've gone from being a boutique competition law firm to, you've been listed as a top 100 global competition law firm, if I've got the information correctly. But you've expanded to become a leader in administrative and constitutional law, white-collar crime, commercial litigation. Has that been out of necessity to continue to grow, or was it always part of the strategy to go beyond what you started in?
I think, James, if I can put it this way, slightly organic and slightly strategic. I think the organic part was a lot of the work that we did, because you have to understand an industry. So what happens? You work in the petroleum industry, there's a merger. You're opposing the Sasol engine merger years ago. So what you then start to learn is you start to learn about how does the industry operate, what are the regulations, etc. Next thing, your client has a regulatory problem, and you've actually been talking to them the whole time about the regulations, administrative law, and then you start helping them with that. So there's a kind of a flow through on that. We'd also years ago done a case for various pharmaceutical companies against wholesalers, pure competition law case. At that particular point, the new single exit pricing regime was coming in for medicines. So the logical person to deal with that was us, because we understood the regulations. So you then start running these constitutional cases. So I think that's the one aspect. The second thing is it's actually very interesting. I think the competition law is one of the the Competition Act of South Africa is one of the transformational statutes. It's a little bit like Nina does a lot of stuff with the MPRDA and so on. Also a transformational statute. So there's a different way of working and a different way of thinking about it. It's less, can I call it black letter law, and a little bit more intuition, a little bit more, not intuition, that's the wrong word, sorry, a little bit more equity-based and so on. So what's quite nice is the thinking behind, I think, the competition, a way of approaching the Competition Act, particularly with the transformational imperatives and the thinking that goes behind constitutional interpretation and litigation, is quite similar. So the two actually support each other. And what we found is, particularly in the last number of years, is that when one brings a constitutional lens on the Competition Act, it brings a whole new depth to the Act and the way to approach the Act. At the same time, you end up doing fascinating constitutional cases.
I love the fact that actually there's so many similarities between any startup. I mean, if I think about the way that my own business has evolved, there's part organic and part strategic. And it's like, if your client wants something, you can't say no, particularly in the startup phase, right? And particularly when you're in a recession, it's like, well, do you do this? Yes, of course we do this. And then you figure it out. But then you start developing strategy as you go. One of the biggest challenges, it seems to me, not just to my industry or to any industry really, is the growth and the impact of AI. I wonder if it's any different in the legal world, because I would imagine that legal startups can be far more agile, more cost-effective, and place bigger firms who are always chasing more billable hours under notice. What does it mean for the future of big law, the impact that artificial intelligence is having on the way that you run your practice?
James, I think it's an open question. I think there's it's obviously developing, and it's developing so rapidly, and I think that's part of the challenge, which is, the question is, does AI render a large part of the kind of work that's, the white collar type of work redundant? Is this our industrial revolution for that type of work? And I think that's the difficulty. And I think the second thing is it's so difficult to predict where it's going. So I think the signs are that it can make you a lot more efficient. If you're nimble, you can use it, and you can challenge others who are less nimble. But at the same time, you might end up riding a tiger that's going to eat you in any event.
Yeah.
When I say eat you in any event, whether you're riding it or not,
Sure.
it's probably going to eat.
No,
eat you.
I think that's a valuable insight, because I think the thing is that there are two very basic responses to AI. There's fear, and it's like, no, we can't. This is going to take my job, which I think is perhaps naive.
Yep.
And then the other one is, well, let's jump on bored and ride the tiger. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that kind of description. But you never know whether it's going to eat you or actually help you. How do you have a strategy yet in place at Norton's that you are seeing how you can adapt and work with it, or is that an organic kind of process that you're just going to have to ride the tiger?
No. I think again, because we're small, we're able to be a little bit flexible about it. But I think you're absolutely right. I don't think you have a choice. As you say, the fear reaction is, I'm not going to do anything, then it's going to eat you. The other reaction is to do exactly what you say, is you try and ride it. Maybe you do ride it. Maybe it does eat you, but then it's going to eat everyone anyway. So, 100%. Your best chance of survival is to ride the tiger.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting ride, let's face it. You helped bring South Africa's very first corporate leniency case. Unpack that first for a bit. What does that actually mean?
So one of the big mechanisms that competition authorities use globally to prosecute cartels is effectively to say, it's like a plea bargain. You come in, you tell me your story, you confess, and you help me prosecute the other members of your cartel, and I'll give you leniency. That's the basic premise. And South Africa introduced one, and we got in with the first. We actually did two things. We got the first one in, and then the second thing that we did is to help the Commission defend their whole corporate leniency policy. It went up to the Supreme Court of Appeal because our client had been given leniency and one of the other cartel members was challenging the whole policy.
So this is just one example of the way in which you've actually shaped law in this country. What was going on behind the scenes there for you? It's like, if I think about my own experience of law, it's like series like Suits or Boston Legal or whatever. There's a very glamorized kind of view of what happens in legal firms. What was going on behind the scenes, and how did it give you a sense of pride that you realized you were breaking new ground here and shaping law?
I think, James, it does, obviously. And I think, one gets a great kick, if I can put it that way, out of delivering something for your client. You win the case, your competitive tick. Second thing is your client, you build a relationship with your client. You work with them for a long time. Most of the cases are very intensive, so you spend a lot of time with the clients. You build a relationship with them. And, it's basically like, if I can put it sort of slightly crudely, you're helping your chum, and that's also quite a nice kick. And then I think afterwards it's quite nice when you say, oh, it's in this case, oh gosh,
we made this happen.
But I think again we've been pretty fortunate in the sense that what you find is you don't have a lot of time to think about it afterwards because you've got
you're moving on to the next.
Yeah, exactly.
There's the expression that I use in the stuff that I create, particularly in content, is churn.
Yeah.
Does that sense of churn ever wear you down in law? The sense that you're moving from you finish one big thing, you can't reflect on it. You've got to move to the next thing. Does that burn a bit for you?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, I think a year can become quite long if you've had a full year, because it's just boom, 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 boom. And, I said to someone, I think when you're at school, if you think about it, and I think it's the way we're kind of conditioned, you've got a year, then you've got, Christmas break, and then you're back in it. And nothing, hopefully, that you're doing the year before you need to do the next year. Where here, the case that you're working on, I mean, sometimes you've got cases that run years. I had one case which it started in 2008 and we finished it the other day.
Oh my word! Yeah,
you don't have control over the time periods, and that's the difficulty.
It comes back to the first question that I was asking about the Comrades Marathon and running an ultra marathon. There's something about having to stay the course of whatever over 90 kilometers. Does that help you, or which came first? It's a chicken and the egg thing. Has the Comrades helped you in being able to sustain that long-term kind of pressure that you face in the cases that you deal with? Or have the long-term cases helped you have that mental fortitude to finish a Comrades Marathon? Or is it both?
I was going to say, I probably shouldn't tell you that my running friends say I'm a mental midget. But
No, I don't buy that.
No, I think the thing, my uncle said to me years ago that exercise is one of those things that actually helps you manage stress and things like that. It's capacity building is what his expression was. And I think that's really what it is. So I think having that discipline, the Comrades is helpful because you've got a guillotine waiting for you. If you don't train, guillotine. So that's helpful. That then forces you into a disciplined training regime. And that I think then helps you with, capacity building from a work perspective.
I think that's good. I mean, look, having never run a Comrades, it's like perhaps my discipline comes from different places, but I would imagine that, from the outside looking at it, it's the way you've described it. So you build capacity in either your training in Comrades or in the work that you do. I want to turn to a story that I actually kind of have very little knowledge of, but it was certainly interesting for me. There was a big fight some time ago between Postnet and the South African Post Office. And from the outside, I think I'm not going to get the facts completely correct, but it's like the Post Office wanted to take over this idea of, couriering small parcels and whatever. I remember thinking back then that there's absolutely no ways that this can pass. Who is going to take on this case? Okay, and then you tend to forget about it. But it's got everything. It's got mail monopoly, a good old-fashioned legal scrap. Just unpack what was really at stake in that fight, because it wasn't more just about parcels. There was something more going on there, right?
So, James, the thing is, it's still carrying on, actually. And, I mean, in broad terms, what you say is correct. The post office says we've got a statutory monopoly. Anything under a kilogram needs to come through the post office. And so that case is in the High Court at the moment. We've got an interdict from the High Court just before COVID. I mean, can you imagine during COVID if you were dependent on the post office delivering your whatever you needed? It kind of beggars the mind. And I mean, all that's happened since is the post office, on its own admission, has become less effective. I mean, half the post offices are being closed. Post office is in business rescue. It's loss-making. And
one kind of wonders why they take on the case in the first place, because in terms of SOEs, it's incredibly inefficient. And anybody who's gone into a post office will know the frustration that one has to deal with. Why would they even take on something like this?
I think they see it as a way of, but the harm to the economy is incredible. I mean, can you imagine? Again, it's just one of those things. Forgetting about the legal side to it, and I mean, but just thinking about it from a common sense perspective. If our economy is suddenly dependent on parcels being delivered by the post office, or I mean, their one argument is, okay, no, well, you as the courier industry can deliver these parcels, but then you need to pay us a royalty. It's essentially a kind of a tax that you're being asked to pay. I mean, it's just, it staggers me. I have to admit, don't know whether this is something I can say on air, but my grandmother didn't like the post office. So, the efficiency of the post office, inefficiency of the post office isn't anything new,
Well, this is the thing. I mean, I think we've all come across like those inefficiencies, and it's not just the post office. The thing that interests me in this is this: was this a case, or is there ever any case that you take on without being approached by the client, where you approach the client and say, "This is something that we want to help you with because we believe in it"? Or is it the majority of cases clients come to you, Postnet comes to you and engages you and takes you on?
So I think, James, with the commercial cases, if I can put it that way, those are mainly where the client approaches you. But sometimes there are cases more in the public interest type of thing where it's you'll say to a particular client who is interested in that area, if you wanted to pursue that, we're happy to help, type of thing. And that's so that's usually where you're acting in a pro bono capacity or something of that sort.
Yeah, I thought we were heading in that direction. Yeah. And I guess a lot of legal firms or a lot of companies even take on pro bono work as a way of creating goodwill. Is there any sense for you where the pro bono work that you take on is something because you truly believe in it? I would imagine you'd have to, otherwise why would you do it, right?
No, I think absolutely. I think a lot of the pro bono work that we've done, we've been, again, very fortunate. We've worked with great NGOs and so on, and even for individuals. But I think those tend to be cases where we feel they're absolutely critical. I mean, we've been involved in this Hlophe case when they're trying to appoint Hlophe to the Judicial Service Commission, and things relating to the Judicial Service Commission itself and how it operates. There was a case years ago with the Dalai Lama being refused a visa. There was the Grace Mugabe case. So there are a whole lot of these type of cases where they go to rule of law issues. And that's pretty fundamental to how the country operates. And I think it's something where actually it has bigger consequences than just sometimes economic cases are critical, commercial cases are critical, but these cases I think can actually have a lasting impact.
And do you feel a sense of responsibility that with the knowledge that you have of the law, that it's unavoidable to take those things on because it's in the public interest? I mean, it's like, because listening to it, there's a sense where I get as a member of the public where thank goodness somebody's taking on this fight, because it's like I don't have the means or the capacity to do it. But the cost to you as a firm and personally must be quite great to bear sometimes.
Yeah, James, but I think it is exactly that. I think one thing that I think is critical for a country, any country, is the fact that we all need to do our bit in a sense, and I think this is the bit that we can do. And as I say, it can actually make a difference. One can sit back and not do it, and again, it's not saying everyone can do it, but each one of us has something that we can do that's worthwhile and makes a difference. And I think we feel this is what we can do. And I think we feel pretty strongly about that. So I think those cases are important to us. And I think, again, we've enjoyed them. They're interesting, they're exciting, all of that type of stuff. But at the same time, we think they're really meaningful cases, and I think, yeah.
You've got a reputation for turning legal spaghetti into plain English boardroom strategy talk. Is there a secret sauce, or is there a moment you realize, actually, okay, I need to speak human rather than lawyer here?
I think, again...
I mean, I don't want to oversimplify it, but I mean, there is a sense where sometimes, if you're in a boardroom situation, it can be incredibly difficult to understand what on earth you're talking about. Is there something that, is it a natural ability? Have you got, what's that secret sauce, I guess?
I think it is something of being confronted by... the need, you're under pressure, you need to get something out relatively clearly and then relatively simply. And I think, again, it's the type of people I've been fortunate to work with. I think that's also helped, like talking about Anthony earlier, but also a number of the advocates that we've worked with, the most incredible advocates. And so you're constantly exposed to that. So I think you get sharpened by the people that you work with. Also, being exposed in competition law, you're very fortunate, you deal with the top people in companies. So again, you're exposed to that kind of way of dealing with things. And again, what people are looking for, quick answer, clear answer, want the detail, want to know it's there, but I don't want to hear all the detail. I want the critical issue that I need in order to take the decision. So that's the challenge. I don't think I necessarily always get it right, but that's the challenge.
Well, here's the thing. And I mean, here's my challenge back to you, because the people that I've spoken to in preparation for this, actually like you. These are your peers. And you were mentioning right at the beginning of this conversation that lawyers tend to fight a lot. How have you somebody, I mentioned also in the intro that you collaborate brilliantly with in-house teams, that you have this innate ability to cut through the BS, I guess one could say, and allow people to see the person. Did you have somebody who mentored you in that, or is that just something, is that a part of who Anton Roets is? You are a guy that is easy liked because why? Why do your peers like you, I guess, would be the simplified question of that, the simplified way of putting that question.
James, to give you, I don't have a simple answer because I don't really know. It's difficult to say. I think I enjoy working with people, and I suspect that's probably, and I enjoy listening to people, enjoy sitting with them, and I think, I wouldn't say I've been fortunate, because where you work with internal teams, I've had fantastic internal people that you work with, and you build a relationship.
But the ability to listen is not an easy one to develop, and people don't often listen, right?
Yeah.
It's like you can hear, but I mean that art of listening is such, in any profession, but in law perhaps more than any other, being able to listen and to hear what's being said at the same time it's an art.
And I think actually I've just listened to 2 books on it. I think it's a discipline as well.
Okay. How so?
Well, I think it's that thing of, one does things without realizing what one does. Someone then says to you, be careful of that. Then you have to start saying, all right, I need to be disciplined. I shouldn't interrupt the whole time. I've got a bad habit of interrupting. So now you try not to interrupt. That's the discipline, I guess.
You mentioned that you've listened to 2 books. We've spoken about comrades listening to 2 books. I mean, is there life outside of law for you beyond those 2 things? And what does it constitute? What does it consist of, rather?
I mean, I think as fascinating as law is, and one big benefit that I've had with the firms that I've worked at is actually most of the people in the firm become friends. Many of the people become friends. So you've got a kind of a social aspect to what you do, but also, and that's the other thing of running, a social aspect. And, so one does have a broader sort of social setup. And then, of course, one has things like Wackerstrom.
I'm so glad you raised Wackerstrom. Because that's where I was heading. So you kind of
thought you were going.
Yeah, you kind of
interrupted
helped me get you are, and I don't want to overstate this, but you are an important figure in the Wackerstrom community. Is that you've done so, and I'm not gonna embarrass you with the stuff that you've done. But what's the were you born in Wackerstrom? What's the appeal of Wackerstrom for you?
James, I mean, if you've been to Wackerstrom, you'll know what the appeal
no,
of
that's the
Wackerstrom
point. I've been to Wackerstrom. So I guess I mean, it's like you've put time and money and effort into a community that people might go, Wackerstrom, never heard of it. Why? What's the appeal for you?
I think the thing about Wackerstrom, again, I'd say it's a community, and I think that's the big thing. My family has been there since 1915. I wasn't born there, didn't grow up in Wackerstrom. People from Wackerstrom will say I'm not a real Wackerstromer, so I'm a bit of an outsider, which is but it's just got a very nice community, and it's also a place that's small enough that one can make a difference. So I think there's some fantastic people in Wackerstrom who are doing really great things. And it's really nice to see that, because I think that's a microcosm, I think, of what could be. Again, I want to be careful here, because now people go to Wackerstrom and say, well, there are potholes here or whatever,
Well, that's the case anywhere in South Africa, so yeah.
But I think it's that idea that you've actually got a community that's trying to do things, and it's everywhere. But I think that is a way that one can actually make a bigger impact.
I didn't want to.
And when I say one, I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about it as a community.
Of course. And I also didn't want to be. I have been to Wackerstrom, and it's actually a wonderful place. The fact that you have a history there is amazing. One thing I do want to tell you is that the person that I spoke to about this, and it's probably not somebody you're expecting, but said that actually you're the unofficial mayor of Wackerstrom. So I don't know if you can be considered an outsider if you've managed to make that much of an impact.
No, that was a joke that one of my friends made, and they keep repeating it and say, if you repeat something often enough,
it becomes true. That's great. You've gone up against the Competition Commission, the Constitutional Court, the Supreme Court. Has there been one case?
I was going to say, James, I haven't gone up against the Supreme Court or the Constitutional Court. You can't go up against them.
Metaphorically speaking, I mean, you've had dealings with them. Have you had a case that's kept you up at night, not because of the law, but what it means to you personally?
Yeah, I think the one thing that we do, and when I say we, because again it is a team, is I think we take our cases quite personally. I don't mean personally but I think we believe in our cases, we believe in our clients' cases generally, and so that does mean sometimes that one's pushing, and you taking on cases which sometimes can have quite serious implications if they go the wrong way. Sometimes, and so I think there are cases where you're worried about where is it going to go, where sometimes you lose in the initial phase. Are you going to go? What's your advice to the client? Go the next step, don't go the next step, that type of thing. And I think when you're giving that type of advice, and also secondly, when they're cases which are, I won't say important cases, but which have serious implications for people, well then, the consequences if they go wrong. I mean, the one, I think one of our big cases was the social grants case. So we took on this. We were acting for a company called AllPay, and against Cash Pay Master Services, we lost in the Supreme Court of Appeal. And then we appealed to the Constitutional Court, and then won in the Constitutional Court. And I think that was quite a fraught process, because obviously it's a huge tender, and you're saying to the client, I think we should go, and
do they have the stomach for more of this?
Yeah. And again, when I say you, the team.
Got you. It's an interesting thing to hear you speak quite sincerely about like really liking your clients or being invested in your cases, because there is a sense, again, comes from ignorance, so I'm prepared to be corrected, where it is about the billable hours, and it's like, well, this is a case that we've got to win because it's our reputation at stake. It's unusual for a legal firm to actually put that out on the table for you. I don't know if that's a personal opinion, but I would imagine that you represent the culture of Norton's Inc., that you care about the cases that you take on. Is that wise in the legal profession?
I mean, I think you have to be careful. You can't let it cloud your judgment. You obviously need to have a dispassionate approach and be able to give that kind of advice. And I think, we focus on giving best advice we can. But I think we feel it's very important, because I think the thing is, if you don't feel, and we've had some cases that we've turned away because we don't like the case. Right.
We
don't.
That's big.
Yeah,
that's big to be turning away work.
Yeah. And I think it's because you want to feel that, firstly, that it's an important case. You can be passionate about it, and that requires you to like the client. Because if you don't like the client, how can you be passionate about the case?
You're known for cutting through complexity with precision. Have you ever walked into a case, let's say, where actually you look at it and think, I cannot fix this chaos, I cannot fix this mess, where but you press on, and what's the thing that keeps you going, or what's the thing that makes you walk away? What's that tipping point for you?
I'm just trying to think. I mean, there are some situations where I think things are pretty heavily cooked. I think we've been pretty fortunate in most of our cases, again, where most of them have turned out. You've got one or two where and I think that's where it comes to, you need to be dispassionate, because ultimately it's a business decision for most clients. Again, different where it's the public interest stuff, but for most clients it is a business decision. I want to litigate on principle. This is wrong, this decision is wrong, and the client says, I don't really care, because it's about winning. It's about winning. Yeah. I need a commercial solution.
Yeah.
So that's where you need to marry the law with the principle to the commercial outcome for the client.
I guess the thing is that you're often faced, or you must be, I would imagine, faced with really difficult decisions like that, where it's a question of commercial success versus principle. I mean, maybe I'm overstepping the line here myself, but does that ever become blurred? How do you keep that separation between blurring the lines between your principles and the commercial impulse of any business?
I think you can't allow the lines between your principles to blur, because then then you're crossing over to something where you can't be passionate about it, if I can put it that way. But I think if you're talking about legal principle, I want it to be correct. This is what I think the law should say. This is how I think it should be interpreted. The tribunal or the court or whatever has found differently. I think you should appeal it because this needs to be corrected. That's my principled approach, not necessarily what the client. Sometimes that is critical for the client, but sometimes for the client it's find a solution.
16 years into running Norton's Inc. as part of a team and part of partners and whatnot, where do you see yourself going, and where do you see the next 5 years going for competition law, for the things that you're involved in?
James, always difficult to predict. We live in such, and I mean, that I think South Africa is so unpredictable and so interesting for that reason, that it's very difficult to see where things go. I think what one needs to constantly do is to check, think, where do you want to go, and look at it. And again, a lot of it's got to do with what appears in front of you, and I think that goes back to your earlier case. We don't select cases. Someone brings us a case, we need to fashion a solution for that case. And that then often opens the door for where you're going. Take the white-collar crime stuff. I mean, nice link between that and competition law. And Anthony, again, found that fascinating and interesting. And he and Michelle particularly developed that whole area. But it was something, again, it's a conscious decision, but it's something where you've had exposure to it because the type of work that we were doing exposed you to that field. And then you say, this is actually quite interesting. Oh, we've got a skill set that we've already developed in this area, which we can leverage across into that area. So, I think, I'm not sure that I've answered your question, but I think basically the...
I think you have. I think it speaks to the way in which, even though we can't predict the future, I mean, I would have been very surprised if you said, well, this is what the next 5 years looks like, actually, because then I would be asking you for the lottery numbers. But there is a sense of that I'm picking up here, that there's the stuff that is interesting, that the stuff that the opportunities present themselves if you're looking for them. So whilst we may not be able to predict the future, and whilst, as you say, cases come to you a lot of the time, you can, if you keep your eyes open. I think I'm hopefully summarizing what you're saying in a different way, but if you keep your eyes open, you can move with where it's going, which is great. So that's the one aspect of it is, but what does it help to kind of at least have some sort of idea of where we're going, particularly in terms of the growth of the firm? I mean, what are the areas that you're looking at next is perhaps a different way of putting it. What are the cases that you're dealing with now that you can see might lead to other avenues of work?
No, I think that's right, James. So I think you're absolutely right. And again, I'd say that the critical thing is to go back to what we were saying earlier on listening, is it's also to be able to hear and to be open to new ideas. And I think one of the things that's, again, talking about Anthony, that's really good about Anthony is he's unorthodox. So you've got that thing where you challenge, or he challenges things, and that opens up thoughts. What we've also found particularly helpful is, again, able to engage with foreign law firms and large international institutions. And again, that opens up thinking and ways of going. So, in terms of our growth, I mean, I think we are comfortable that I think the other thing is you want stuff that you don't want to be doing rote stuff, because that's not that interesting. So the stuff that we're doing, you want to be expanding, so focusing on your area of skill, but expanding your or changing the lens in which you look at it. And I think that's where the constitutional overlay, particularly at the moment, is very helpful, because the competition law stuff helps you in your constitutional cases, the economic side to it, take the post office case we were talking about earlier, but at the same time you then take the constitutional stuff and then you look at the competition law and you see the two in the same, it's the cross-pollination. And I think that's critical, is to expand in areas which are, you've already got a footprint and you've already got a base. I mean, but you can deepen and then cross-pollinate.
It kind of speaks to how one should run any business, really. Yeah. It's like, you can't get stuck in what you're doing, because it can become, unless I mean, I'm trying to think of off the top of my head of an industry where it is. It doesn't matter if you do the same thing over. It's amazing. But it speaks to the need to grow, to be prepared to find overlaps, to find those things that complement what you're doing to allow growth, and also to be flexible enough, which I think I would imagine a firm like Norton's Inc. is able to still be agile and flexible to see the opportunity and to move into that.
James, sorry, I was just thinking when you were saying now, you triggered a thought. I mean, the one thing that we have is we've got economists who are genuine economists. They're becoming increasingly like lawyers, but they're genuine economists. And so that gives us an additional angle. And that's a whole different field because, again, what you do is you can use that capability both for the cases that you're doing, but it also allows you to broaden, and it gives you an ability to offer something more to the clients than just, okay, I'm going to,
It's been a fascinating conversation with you, and I've learned a heck of a lot about law, even in this short kind of space of time. I guess where I want to leave this is, for yourself personally, how do you see yourself developing over the next 5 years? I mean, you were talking earlier on about the fact that you finish one case and you go straight into the next one. You are one of the founders and if my language is correct, the partners in this business that is responsible for other people, their livelihood, but not only that, your own. What does the future hold for Anton Roets?
James, I suppose more of the same in a sense, I mean, but I think the thing is more of the same in the sense that I think one needs to carry on and one needs to find ways of reinventing. I think C.S. Lewis, this is a terrible thing to say because I'm going to use it. C.S. Lewis used a phrase, I think it was in A Grief Observed, so it wasn't particularly good.
That's a heavy book.
But I think he said, God is the great iconoclast. Every time you think you've kind of understood him, then he breaks that picture and you have to start growing and learning again. And I think in some sense, one needs to be open to changing, to developing. And I think the thing is, I think the people you work with help that. Because if you work with people who challenge you, with people who have different ideas or even similar ideas but have firmer views on ideas, I think that's a way of kind of constantly, developing. Because I think I can say that I think through some of the people that I've been working with, I mean, it really changes your way of operating because it's very easy to get stuck in a rut, stuck in a rut where you don't even recognize it. You think that you're being innovative, and you are probably, and and then someone else comes across and says, well, what about this? And you go, oh my goodness, I hadn't thought of that, And so I think it's that. And a lot of this has got to do with who are the people that you meet, who are the people who come into your life, and what are the opportunities that come to you? Because, as much as we can go and find things, a lot of it depends on what gets given to you in a sense,
You mentioned one of my favorite authors, C.S. Lewis. So that leads me to not conclude the podcast there, but to say, do you have authors that you turn to regularly that have made an impact on the way that you run your business?
I suppose I don't think necessarily. Obviously, it's how it affects your life, which affects the way in which you operate. I think C.S. Lewis is one. There's another guy called Tom Wright, who I think is fantastic, although my neighbour tells me that he's terribly convoluted. I don't think so.
I've read Tom Wright as well, and I think he's got a great brain. There's no doubt about that. Which leads me then to another question, which is using those two authors as my straw poll. You're obviously a man of faith. How does that impact the way that you do business?
Well, I suppose it goes to, again, that thing of your principles, and I think a lot of the stuff that we do here is stuff that we feel is the right thing to do.
Do you think it's easy to be a lawyer and a believer?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. I think all of us have challenges. All of us do things that we shouldn't do, but that's that's how our lives work. So I don't think there's anything that makes it any more difficult or less difficult. And I think the thing is one just has to try and find a way of navigating or being helped to navigate what comes before you, And I think the one thing is particularly, maybe it's just what one sees, but I think being involved with law does give you an opportunity to help change things and help improve things in ways, which I think is and that you can see it. Because I think a lot of us change things where you can't necessarily see what's happened. Where, the nice thing about being in a case is you can say, tick, there's that case. Now it goes back, now I'm going to contradict what I said earlier, but it goes back to that thing where you can say, okay, wow, there it is. Where I think if you've got a job where you're going day to day to day to day, or a life where you're going day to day, it's a little bit more difficult to see the ticks, but the ticks are there. They're just less easy to see.
Anton, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. I've learned a lot about the legal profession in a very short space of time, which actually does speak to that thing that you're able to unpack things in a way that is easy to understand. And I wish you and Norton's the very best of I'm going to say luck, but we don't believe in luck necessarily, but all the best. And thank you for your time.